Ignite to Impact.
Hi, this is Dr. Geneva, and welcome once again to Ignite to Impact. You know, we're here at this podcast to inform and inspire positive, meaningful change within ourselves and in others. So I'm Dr. Geneva, leadership coach, strategist, and now a best-selling author. I'm just so glad to be back with you again. We're sitting down talking with influencers, as you know, all the time about what they do and how they make a difference. And so we're going to continue doing that on this podcast, but I'm going to add a special new element to it, and I just can't wait to tell you all about it. But in the meantime, I want you to know that we're going to be sharing strategies on how to create extraordinary impact in organizations. We're still going to do that within the community, and we're going to talk about what to do in everyday life, especially for those of you out there over 50. So, if you want better results in your life, your career, your community, or maybe you're just eager to hear some great leadership advice, or just want to be inspired to make good things happen, Ignite to Impact is for you. So, you know, I'm going to be talking over the next few podcast episodes about leadership. Impact, what I call impact leadership, the kind of leadership where you make a difference, where you really make a difference. And that's all about igniting to impact and unleashing our potential. And I want you to let me know if you love my podcast. I want you to download it. I want you to rate it. I want you to give me 4 or 5 stars. I'll take either one. I want you to visit me at my Facebook group. You know what that is, Extraordinary Women Influencers. Please come on and join. I love to hear from you. And I also want to invite you to listen every week to Ignite to Impact. So I want to talk to you first. And you know, soon in the next few days, it's going to be all about Black History Month. So for those of you who are interested in hearing and reflecting about the tremendous contributions that people of color, African Americans, make in our world, this is the time to do it, but we need to keep that going on all year round. So I want to talk a little bit about leadership and leading by example. You know, people who are especially good at what they do get noticed. They attract and hold our attention. We admire them, and we imitate them and sometimes try to duplicate them. In many cases, we view people who excel as leaders. It seems only natural to watch what they say and do and follow their example, whether that means agreeing with a political position or wearing a certain style of clothing or perhaps buying a particular watch or mobile phone. That's certainly why advertisers look to celebrities to pitch their brands. Now, some of you may remember when Charles Barkley, the Hall of Fame basketball star and current NBA commentator, gained notoriety during his playing days for saying that he didn't want to be known as a leader or as an example to young people. He said, "I'm not a role model," in a 1993 Nike commercial. Parents should be role models. Just because I dunk a basketball doesn't mean I should raise your kids. Now, that's what he said. Now, it could be argued that he had a point, but Charles Barkley was criticized for his remarks, and most of the responses he got were a variation of, "Sorry, too late. You're one of the biggest sports stars in the world. You're on television all the time, and you make a lot of money. Being one of the best at what you do has made you a leader. In fact, Karl Malone, one of Barkley's pro basketball peers at the time, corrected him in a Sports Illustrated magazine column. He said, "Charles, I don't think it's your decision to make. We don't choose to be role models. We are chosen. Our only choice is whether to be a good role model or a bad one." Malone and others were saying, you might as well live up to the position in which you've already been placed. The responses Barkley got essentially restated that familiar Bible verse, "Unto whom much is given, much is required." The lesson for leaders is that the abilities and skills that lift you to the forefront must be maintained. In fact, they must be further developed and enhanced if you're to remain in your leadership role and to have meaning. Outstanding performance is both a prerequisite and a constant requirement for what I call impact leadership, that make a difference leadership, that leadership that focuses on what you do now, but is always looking at the legacy you'll leave. For many gifted people, leadership comes naturally. It flows from their actions and often seems to come with the territory. Others realize their potential for leadership only after someone else recognizes it and encourages them to pursue further development. My father, Ermon Jones, was one of those natural leaders. At 6'3", he was a tall man whose height attracted attention from the time he was a boy. People expected him to excel in basketball because the sport usually rewards the tallest players. But great potential is never enough. No one knew how good my father was until he was picked for his high school teams, got on the court, and began to compete against other players. When my dad joined the basketball team at Neptune High School in Neptune, New Jersey, now that's where I grew up, my dad's hometown. It's on the coastline of the Jersey Shore, right in the middle of New York and Atlantic City, right there on the water. But when my dad joined the basketball team at Neptune High, which was the same high school I went to, but during his sophomore year, now that was in 1939, 1940, he became the first black player in the history of the high school. His performance and his contribution to the team continuously improved until his senior year, which was about 1941-42 or so, when he led Neptune to an historic undefeated regular season and the championship of the New Jersey Shores Conference. During a semifinal game of the conference tournament, my dad set a tournament record by scoring 21 points, a very impressive performance during an era when it was common for entire teams to score 30 points or less. Now, that isn't what happens now. Players now score them 20, 25, 30 points, in the first 5 minutes of a game. But back then, it was very impressive. And so my father's dominant performances helped the Neptune Scarlet Flyers, that was their name, win the Central Jersey sectional title and then upset the favored team in the state semifinals. Now, at that point, Neptune was set to play in the final game for the state championship. The team had won 21 straight games and was the only undefeated team in New Jersey for the first time in the school's history. The Scarlet Flyers had tremendous momentum, and for the first time, the whole town was in a fever of excitement, largely because of the skill and leadership of its only African-American player. Unfortunately, Neptune lost that final game in 1942, but the season remained a triumphant memory for the town and for my father for the rest of his life. The lesson is that my father's development of his God-given talent and his outstanding performance under pressure made him an undisputed leader. Now, by the way, my dad continued to attract attention and admiration for his athletic ability. He played basketball for Morgan State, a predominant historically black university in Baltimore, Maryland. And at the time of his college graduation, after his service in World War II, Dad felt he was good enough to play in the newly formed then National Basketball Association, the NBA. But the opportunity to pursue that goal never fully materialized. His more realistic goal of teaching academic courses and coaching high school or possibly college basketball also didn't happen. But my father fully prepared himself for such a career. This time, racial discrimination in his own hometown blocked his path. But no one could say he wasn't ready for a greater level of leadership in his chosen field. So Ermon K. Jones, my dad, never aspired to social activism or leadership of a major organization during the historic civil rights movement of the 50s, 60s, or 70s. However, his dramatic victory in a personal 3-year battle with institutional racism became a natural stepping stone to regional civil rights leadership that made him the spokesman of his community. What he did was challenge the widely accepted practice of excluding black families from the suburban housing developments that became very popular among young American families during the baby boom of the 50s and 60s. My father, working in full agreement and partnership with my mom, took his challenge all the way to the New Jersey Supreme Court. And in 1962, 3 years after his lawsuit was filed, the court made a landmark decision that affected the history of housing discrimination in the United States. So my parents began by simply attempting to build a house in a new residential subdivision called Asbury Gables within the Jersey Shore coastal region of central New Jersey. My father then worked in the engineering department of a federal military supply center, and my mother taught grade school, and she became the community's first black elementary school teacher. They had savings for a substantial down payment and excellent credit, like most other home buyers at the time. But after visiting the Harder Realty Company sales center twice and getting the runaround, during the third visit, the sales director bluntly told my parents, "The developer does not build homes for Negroes." Now, my folks were shocked but not surprised. Segregation and discrimination infected every part of American society at that time. But rather than make other plans, my father decided to fight back. The lawsuit, filed in his name, worked its way through state government channels, then made it to a final decision by the state's highest court after 3 years of delays and skirmishes and public harassment and personal sacrifice my parents endure. And I talk about a lot of this, including the death threats and the harassing phone calls in the middle of the night, in the book my dad and I wrote called Justice on the Jersey Shore. And I want you to, take a moment, particularly during this time of Black History Month, to go to Amazon and get that book. And when you do, leave me a review. Let me know what you think about it. And when my dad was fighting and had made this, historic thing happened. I do remember climbing the steps to the New Jersey Supreme Court building with my family on the day of that ruling. I was about 13 years old. The court's unanimous decision in my dad's favor was a victory for civil rights and yet another blow to segregation nationwide. And once again, my father's outstanding performance under pressure demonstrated a natural leadership that gave him the credibility he needed to lead others years later as a social activist. Soon after his victory in the housing lawsuit, Dad became active in the NAACP, the premier civil rights organization of that era. And by 1967, he was elected president of the regional branch, and he served several consecutive 2-year terms. And he proved his leadership ability in the trenches and by working. And he fell into, in spite of himself, perhaps like Charles Barkley, but in spite of himself, he fell into leading by example because he had that outstanding performance. So I just wanted to, come on and just leave you with that, what I think is a lesson in make a difference leadership, that sometimes you don't carve your way into leadership and sometimes you do. It's very intentional. But the point is, by what you do, how you model yourself, what you do, how you lead by example, that's in fact what makes a difference. And you lead by example because of what you do, your outstanding performance. So if you like what I'm talking about here on this podcast, Ignite to Impact, and we talk about extraordinary leadership that everyday people do, everyday people bring to influence and change lives. Download my podcast. Let me know how you feel about it. Give me a rating. Don't give me anything less than a 4 or 5 because I know you enjoy this and I know it's something really cool to listen to and hear about all these terrific influencers who are making a difference, who we talk about and they do what they do to make change and to make it better for all of us. So again, if you want to know about extraordinary impact, listen to Ignite to Impact. This is Dr. Geneva coming to you once again. It's been real great to be with you.
Ignite to Impact.